Hello and welcome to attaQ. My name is Jakob, I'm your host, and you're watching a attaQ episode. And I want you to listen to something real quick first. Now, I made that by using sounds from one app. And the reason to me doing that is because I try to get my brain to think creatively about sound design once again. You see, I've been blocked and everything I've made in synthesizers have felt bland and uninspiring. And I can't have that because I'm supposed to deliver sounds to a client who commissioned me for making sounds for their app. In fact, I have 3 clients I'm supposed to deliver sounds to, but I've had to postpone the delivery dates because of my creative block. And so to try to get out of it, I'm trying to make music and I'm using sounds from one app. And so what you just heard and all the sounds in that track, well, they all came from Figure. So someone else made the sounds, but I had to do some creative things inside AUM in order to make them sound interesting. Now, I'm really happy with the results I got with the bass and how I made that, because for once I was able to think creatively. So I want to show you what I did. Now I have 2 bass sounds in my track, and so here's the first one. And now I'm gonna play it without all the processing, because the truth is that this first bass sound was built from 3 different bass sounds that I then processed with different effect chains to make them fit together. Now I'm going to show you what I did to fit these 3 different sounds together to make this awesome sounding bass. But before I do that, I want to play you the second bass sound because it's different from the first one. Now, since both of these bass sounds were made with the same effects chain, it doesn't make any sense for me to explain how each of them were made. I'm going to take the one that is unique here, the one made with 3 different bass sounds, and then show you the effects chain and explain a little bit about what I was thinking, while making this. Alright, so normally when I work with layered bass sounds, I always make at least 2 layers. One for the sub bass, for the bottom, to carry the bass. And then I use a top layer. But in this case, I needed 3 because I wanted to get creative. I wanted this one to sound different. And the reason for that is so silly. I was sitting there in Figure making loads of different bass loops, and I ended up liking all of them and I wanted to use all of them, but I didn't just want to put one loop after another, so I just decided to try to play them all at once, and it sounded awful. So I thought to myself, can I get these to work together, because right now they're just fighting. Naturally, one place they fight in is in the bass. right? Because they're all basses and they all want to do bass stuff around the bass frequencies. Now, since I was going to use 3 different bands, I had to go through all of my loops to see which one of the sounds would fit together, and also which one of them that would fit together would do the best type of sub bass, the best type of mid bass, the best type of high frequency bass. Now, the first thing I did for all of them was filter them. So for the sub bass, I removed all the high frequencies. And next, I put a compressor on there. Now, to be honest with you, I don't want to use compressors. I want to use distortion and saturation plugins. But it turns out that the best plugin I have for that, which is Saturn 2 by FabFilter, it's very heavy. And I didn't know how many tracks I would end up with, so I decided to go with something a bit lighter, Rough Rider 3 by Audio Damage, which is a free compressor plugin. I'm very much in love with bass, and bass for me needs to be pronounced, it needs to be heavy, it needs to carry the track. And whenever you're playing bass sounds in stereo, you can lose a bit of the weight of it, the punch of it. And that's why I monoize the sub bass. Now, you might be wondering what I'm using this plugin for. This is Perforator by Bose. It is a stuttering plugin. And so why, Jakob, are you using a stuttering plugin on a sub-bass layer? Well, when I started mixing these sounds together, they didn't fit. Well, the mid layer and the top layer bass sounds, they both have these highly articulated percussive elements to them. And the sub-bass have these long sub-bassy notes, and that created a lot of muddiness in the bottom. To make it fit, I basically made the bass more percussive by stuttering it. Alright, so that was the sub layer. Now, I did actually start working on the mid layer and top layer before I even did this stuttering thing. Like I said, I wanted to mix everything together, and that's when I discovered the sub bass was too muddy. And so let's move on to the mid layer. Alright, so let's have a look at this signal chain here. Now, we can see that I once again got a Rough Rider 3 plugin at the top, and I'm doing that just to keep some peaks in check. If we move on from the compressor, we can see that I have filtered off some low end, because remember, this is supposed to be the mid layer. Now, you could be asking me, Jakob, why aren't you filtering off the high frequencies? I mean, you're gonna have a top layer with the high frequencies, right? Yes, but like I said, I wanted to get creative with some effects, and in this case, I wanted to use a chorus effect to get movement into this bass layer. And how am I answering your question with that statement? Well, it turns out that I didn't know at this point how much of the high frequencies I would need to get this chorus effect to sound good. You see, I could always filter off what comes out after the chorus effect with another filter if I want to remove some high frequencies. For this, I wanted to keep the high frequencies to run it through the chorus to see what that would do. Now, this might look a bit confusing for some, because as you can see, I did the same thing here as I did with the bass layer. I kept it all in mono, and then I put a chorus on there to spread it out into stereo. I did that on purpose, because when I put the chorus effect right on there without this monoizer in between, well, I was already running a stereo track into a chorus, and that spread it out too much. I wanted to limit that down. Instead of touching the chorus effect itself, I just monoized it with this thing here, and yeah, voila, I had it. Now, Now the mid layer is very percussive, and that could have created a problem with the top layer, which is the one we're gonna have a look at next. I chose something that had more of a melody to it. And initially it started fighting a bit with the mid layer because of its percussive nature. And I ended up having to filter off more bass from the mid bass layer than I do on the top bass layer. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how good a sound sounds. If it doesn't fit the mix, it doesn't fit the mix, and you do whatever you have to save that mix. And if it means filtering off more bass from the mid bass layer, then so be it. Okay, so I've talked about the filter, and as you can see, there is also a compressor here, Rough Rider 3 once again, and so it's not that interesting. What's interesting here is what's happening further down the chain, because right down here, I have a reverb. Now, I wanted some attitude for this top bass sound. And so I tried out phasers, flangers, delay, ring modulations, anything, and nothing worked. Until I realized that all I needed to do was to give this sound some space, a very small, cramped space. Suddenly it sounded great. And then I went on from there, trying to mix these sounds together. Once I had them all leveled, it was time for the last step in this sound design kind of thing. Now, what I haven't disclosed yet is that I'm trying to make music that is of the cyberpunk-esque type nature. And I've added a section towards the end of this video where I'm talking about the music I'm making here and why I'm making it. Okay, so the last thing I needed to do with the bass sound was to get them all into the same room so I could heat them all up a little bit with a preamp. And the preamp I chose was Reamp by Klevgren Produkter, formerly known as Klevger or Klevgren Produktion. This plugin is so nice and worth every penny you spend on it because it's got some nice noisy algorithms in there. And it's also very easy to bring edginess out of your sounds, especially when it comes to the high end and the mid range. It's doing something to it and it sounds great. And the reason too why I also wanted all of these sounds going through the same channel was because I wanted to be able to duck them with my bass drum. And there you go, that's how I made these bass sounds. And when it comes to the second sound, I used the same processing that I had made for the first one. The only difference was I, of course, switched out the material in the file players up here in the instrument slots. And then I just simply pulled down a little bit on the sub-bass level because it turned out that for this particular sound, it was already so bass heavy, so I needed to pull back on it a little bit. Okay, so for those of you who have stuck around, let me tell you about the reason to why I'm making this music. You see, I've been playing a game lately. It's called CyberPunk 2077. And what I want to talk about is how much the music in the game has inspired me. Because out of all games I've played, I think this has got one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. I love the music in here. And there has been days where I started up the game and I forgot to start the game. I got stuck at the title image, you know, where it says Cyberpunk 2077 and you're supposed to press a button, but I couldn't get off there. I couldn't press the button because I just wanted to listen to the title track over and over and over. And that's not the only thing, it's the background sounds, the environmental sounds, the mission music, the music that happens sometimes when there are certain events happening in the world. Now the game is broken and buggy as nothing else because I'm playing it on an older console. Yes, I'm one of those old gen console players, which means that I'm having to deal with a lot of stuff. But for listening to music, it works well. Just start the game, make sure you don't do anything, and you can listen to a lot of music. Now, there are so many things in that music that I love. The way that they're using super stacked saw waveform leads, like a bee swarming sound. And then I also love how they've been using some influences from the 80s synth era. Yeah, there's so many elements in there that just fits really well with me. If you want to hear what it all sounds like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, do yourself a favor and search for Cyberpunk 2077 soundtrack or OST or title track at least, and just listen to the music. For me, it's super inspiring. Might not be for everybody, but I think you really should go and check it out if you haven't yet. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this episode, then I suggest that you just hit that thumbs up, and also if you want to support me in a financial way, you have the links over here, and share my videos, share the links, so share, I don't even know what to say. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.